Oh, great. Hey, everyone.
Hello there.
Hey,
Ah, sweet. Okay, thanks for
Dave.
your patience, guys. Um,
I have to join the audio. There we go. Video. How do you like my background? Woo,
Beautiful.
woo.
Jealous.
All right, so
Is
thank
that
you.
Oakland?
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Is that Oakland in the background?
That was actually a photo. I don't know where it is. Actually, it could be Oakland.
I think it is. I think
It
I
is.
recognize
Okay. Yeah, cool. It was on it was actually on Georgette Gomez, who's city council president. It was one of her input forms. She had that at the top, so I just grabbed it. It's very nice.
Oscar, should we see if your audio is working there?
Sure, can you hear me?
Sounds good.
I can hear you.
And do we have Andy with us as well?
Yep.
There he is.
Cool. So thank you to all the early folks who joined on here. We'll get started in a couple minutes. Thank you to Dave for the last minute panel edition. That's very exciting. Thanks for joining us.
Hey,
Good to
Dave.
be here. Hey, Andy. Hey, everyone.
Cool. You're doing good stuff.
We're trying. We're trying.
Cool.
Happy to announce that our sister city here, Alameda, right next to Oakland, is starting 2 slow streets on Thursday. It'll be our third city to implement them.
That's awesome.
In fact,
What's up, Oscar?
Hey, Andy.
Haven't seen you in a while.
No. Happy to be joining with all you.
Yeah.
So that putting a photo in the background is really easy. You just go to preferences, like under the zoom.us on the top left, go into preferences and you can just put a photo in the background. Super easy.
Just an FYI, your photo looks backwards to us, I think.
Oh, really? So that was so weird. So I made it backwards. All right, I'm going to swap that out right now. Because I thought, oh, it looks backwards to me. So I'm thinking, oh, it must be.
Yeah, I've seen people have to do that back and forth.
Okay, I'm going to fix that real quick.
Oscar,
throwing into the chat a link to the
bike picture in the
Alameda.
back. Looks very 3D.
Announcement.
Well,
I just threw into the chat Alameda's announcement for slow streets if you want to check it out.
all right, so does it look, is it the right way now?
Yes.
But it's backwards to me.
No, it looks good. They say never look at yourself on a video call.
Right, I was looking at the background. I wasn't looking. Hey, Dave, how is the bike share going in Oakland?
It's been struggling. I don't think people are using it a whole lot right now, but it was struggling before the shelter in place. Motivate's going to introduce electric bikes back to Oakland. They've already done that in San Francisco. We should be getting them, who knows when now, sometime soon. And that's going to help have a lot more electric bikes. I think we're going to end up with 7,000 electric bikes in the Bay
Nice.
Area,
Mm-hmm.
plus some other manually powered bikes. But there's just been lots of problems, and I think the scooters are way more popular, way more.
I was reading they're way more dangerous too. Are you guys seeing those stats?
The scooters?
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything that convinced me. I've seen headlines that say things, and then you go look at the numbers and you realize, well, those numbers are very comparable. Why the headline? And so, you know, they interview one doctor in one hospital who says, oh yeah, I saw 3 people with their head cracked open. Scooters are the most dangerous things ever. And they don't bother to actually look at the real stats. Yeah, so as far as I can tell, they're just as safe as bicycling, but what they do, since there's so many more of them, they make everyone else on the street safer because there's so many more scooters on the street. No one looks at that stat or those safety stats. Andy's trying to do what I try to do, change my background, and everything gets weird.
Hello, this is.
I get some weird glow thing.
Yeah, you got to use Microsoft Internet Explorer, I think. Firefox and Safari don't work.
Oh, okay. I'm using Chrome, but yeah.
Hello,
Hi, Rita.
no, this is Paula.
Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 minute here. And just a heads up to folks that are already on, we are recording today's webinar. So just putting that on everyone's radar. Thanks for your patience. All right, it's 2 o'clock, so I think we should get started. Hi, everyone, again. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Slow Streets Response to COVID-19 in San Diego. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Noah Harris, and I'm a transportation policy advocate with Climate Action Campaign, whose mission is simple: to stop the climate crisis. We work with cities throughout San Diego to adopt local policies that will help make us climate safe and climate ready. And my focus is on embracing sustainable transportation strategies, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Our panel of 5 advocates, which I'll introduce in a couple of minutes, will discuss the need for additional street space for pedestrians and cyclists in response to the coronavirus crisis. Cities all over the world are implementing slow streets programs, as they're being called, to allow for physical distancing for walkers, bikers, and commuters making essential trips, and to create much needed outdoor space for folks in quarantine. Some cities are even piloting these ideas to think about how our streets can be made permanently safer and reimagined to focus more on people instead of cars. And so today, our panel will be discussing the potential implementation of slow streets initiatives in San Diego and explore some examples from other cities. We'll start today's session with a couple of questions I prepared for our panelists, and then we'll move into a Q&A session. Feel free to post questions as they come up in the chat, which is located at the bottom of the Zoom page here. And again, before I introduce our panelists, I'd just like to briefly provide some context. In early April, Bike SD, a local advocacy organization, sent a letter to the mayor urging the city to implement slow streets. This inspired a group of advocates to come together to write another letter to the mayor with a set of slow streets recommendations. Our diverse coalition of organizations made 4 main recommendations. 1, we asked that pedestrian crosswalk buttons be switched to transition automatically, so walkers don't have to press a possibly infected button to cross the street. 2, we provided a selection of streets on which the city could make increased space for walkers and bikers. 3, we requested reduced traffic speeds for safer street conditions in general. And finally, we called for creative forms of community engagement in this unprecedented time to ensure that essential workers are not negatively impacted by a slow streets initiative. And at the same time, really, we got word that the city also took up conversations about slow streets on their own. And I want to take this moment here to recognize that this crisis is happening in real time, obviously, and there's no roadmap for this historical moment. Both advocates and city staff are grappling with challenging questions and concerns. There are different opinions within our own coalition when considering best ways to roll out a slow streets initiative. And I definitely want to make space today to make sure all of those ideas and concerns are talked through. I'm excited at the same time that the city is considering taking a first step, but urge them to keep our initial recommendations in mind and to always make essential workers and pedestrians' safety the top priority. Additionally, the city needs to make sure to implement an expansive network of slow streets to prevent creating a regional draw, which could possibly further expose residents to the virus. And it's important for us to remember that this potential initiative will be a pilot, and so we should all prepare for adjustments as needed. And before we jump into the panel, I'm just going to share my screen really quickly and share some pictures. All right, so if everyone can still hear me, cities have taken on a variety of methods in implementation. So pictured here are full street closures, which are only open to pedestrians and cyclists and emergency access. Pictured here are what's being called open curbs, which are expansions of the sidewalk into a parking lane or a travel lane. These are examples of shared streets which are closed to through traffic, but are still shared between various modes of travel. And excuse me. This is an example of signal recall. So pedestrians don't have to press what's being called beg buttons to cross the street. And finally here, pictured are local efforts already in place at Presidio and Jackson. And on this note, I want to thank Nicole Burgess for the pictures that she shared and all the advocacy she's done for Slow Streets and her leadership and her attendance today. So stop share. All right, now I'll move into introductions. And I want to acknowledge, first of all, we have an elected official here on the webinar, Councilmember Mark West from Imperial Beach. He's already indicated a desire to see what his city can do to embrace slow streets. So thanks for being on the call, Councilmember. And now I'll introduce some of our panelists and jump into the first question. So Maya Rosas served as Circulate San Diego's Director of Policy, where she leads Circulate's efforts on Vision Zero, community planning group reform, and other campaigns. She has worked in safe streets advocacy, land use planning, and housing in both the nonprofit and private sectors in San Diego since 2012. So Maya, why don't you start us off? How do you define slow streets, and what are some examples you've seen of successful implementation?
Well, I would define slow streets as streets that are meant to be shared with everyone and provide space for everyone safely. You know, there are literally dozens of examples of where these different versions of slow streets have been implemented. You've shown just a few of them, and those are really great examples of the variety of different ways that slow streets can be implemented. But I think what the point is that San Diego is the 8th largest city in the United States, and there are dozens, literally dozens of other cities that have already taken some step towards creating a safe space for people to get around. People still need to transport themselves for work or to access essential needs. And it is vital for people to be able to do so safely. You know, that was true before the COVID crisis, and that's why I'm so involved with Vision Zero. And that's true today, making sure that we just have enough space to walk safely. So there are many, many good examples of different types of slow streets out there now. And the good thing is that we can examine them and analyze them and apply what makes sense to San Diego. And that's what we should be doing now.
Great. Thank you, Maya. And that's actually a great segue for our next introduction. So yeah, I'll introduce Dave, who's joining us on our panel. Dave Campbell coordinates the advocacy and policy work of Bike East Bay in 33 cities, towns, and jurisdictions in the East Bay, and at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, the Alameda County Transportation Authority, and other regional transportation agencies. So Dave, what are some examples of successful implementation that you've seen, and can you tell us about the advocacy work you've been involved in the East Bay?
Yeah, we helped Oakland launch their Slow Streets program now 3 weeks ago. And I think they might have been the 5th city in the country to do something like that. I think New York went first, pulled it out. Denver did that. And I think you even showed a photo of one of the Denver streets. And the Denver example was a lot of inspiration for what Oakland did. And so Oakland, we asked Oakland, the advocates asked Oakland to do a lot of the things that y'all asked them to do, the ped beg buttons, widen sidewalks, things like that. And they came back and said, well, what we want to do is 74 miles of slow streets instead. And so a lot of the advocates, you know, were quite delighted to hear that. It's certainly ambitious. It's essentially the neighborhood boulevard network that Oakland adopted in their bike plan last year. So it was implementing the slow traffic piece of their bike plan that they did a lot of outreach on last year. So they relied on the outreach that they did in the bike plan a year ago as a basis to try to calm these streets at this time. And Oakland's in its 3rd week. They rolled out 5 miles the first week. They rolled out another 5 miles the second week. They paused on their 3rd week to catch up. The city and the advocates were scrambling a lot to make sure the program was working efficiently, and we were doing outreach and getting feedback and modifying it. In various neighborhoods, it was working differently. So we paused on the 3rd week, and then this is our 4th week, so it'll be our 15th mile of slow streets. And the plan is to do 5 miles every week until we get to something like 74 miles is the goal, which wouldn't happen until sometime in the summer. And before Oakland started, our local partners in Berkeley asked Berkeley to do the same thing on Berkeley's bike boulevards. And the city of Berkeley said no, and has still said no to this day. And our local partners have been pushing Berkeley to do it. Now Oakland's done it. And Oakland has inspired Emeryville to do a slow street on Doyle Street, which is a street they'd already had plans to turn into a slow street and actually close off one of the blocks where there's a park. And so they took this opportunity to just go ahead and do that with barriers and some posts. And then I included the link to Alameda, city right next to Oakland. They've been inspired by Oakland, and they're going to do their first 2 slow streets starting Thursday. And then you may have heard also San Francisco is doing a similar program now, working with Walk San Francisco and San Francisco Bike Coalition. So it's taken off, and it's generally very popular. And I will say this, the Alameda County Public Health Department is supportive of the program. A crucial thing, a crucial aspect of this.
Great. Thanks, Dave. And I think that actually that sets us up well for some important questions to dive into. So I'll jump over to Oscar now. Oscar, thanks for joining the panel. Oscar Medina is a transportation justice advocate with the Environmental Health Coalition, where he works to advance local and regional policies that reduce air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from transportation sources. He previously worked at Circulate San Diego on active transportation planning projects and various policy initiatives related to transportation and land use. So Oscar, what are your thoughts on how a city can act quickly? It's clear that Oakland really acted quickly and inspired a lot of other cities. During this crisis, how can our city act quickly during this crisis to implement slow streets while ensuring best practices? And what are some potential concerns you have for slow streets initiative for rolling out a new initiative here in San Diego?
Hi, Noah. Thanks for organizing this panel and for the invitation. So Environmental Health Coalition is an environmental justice organization, and we work in communities most impacted by toxic pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, historically communities that have been disinvested. So it's crucial now more than ever that these communities be involved with any solutions to improve quality of life during the pandemic. So we're meeting with residents in Barrio Logan and City Heights, where we work to understand the streets that work best for them. We heard from Barrio Logan that Logan Avenue would be a good street that folks could walk by, could use, where they could walk by some of the few existing businesses still open. Our plan is to send this information we collect over from our resident leaders to the city, and we encourage the city to partner with community-based organizations like Environmental Health Coalition that have existing community networks to help reach vulnerable groups in environmental justice communities. This pandemic is an unprecedented dynamic situation, but it cannot be an excuse not to engage residents. So we encourage the city to find creative ways to engage residents in an equitable way that accounts for the fact that not everyone has access to technology and will not be reachable through traditional online engagement. As far as concerns, I think you talked a little bit at the beginning. We hope that whatever gets rolled out is an extensive network, not just a few selective streets, so that these streets that are selected don't become destinations. And this also shifts the focus and purpose of slow streets from being recreational use to one that is supporting people to fulfill their basic needs.
Great, thanks, Oscar. And so, yeah, I'll take this opportunity now to introduce our final two panelists and open up a question to our whole panel. Andy Hanshaw has been the executive director at the Bike Coalition since July of 2011. He's also the founder and organizer of the annual Bike to Bay community bike ride that takes place each August in San Diego. A career nonprofit and development professional, he has led efforts to help small businesses work with business improvement districts in San Diego and Portland, Oregon. And finally, Judy Tenter is executive director of the nonprofit advocacy organization Bike SD. She believes that riding a bicycle is a solution to many of the environmental, social equity, and health issues that San Diego faces. And she has an electric bike that makes hills easy. So to you both, and now opening up to everyone as well, would love to hear from you both first. Why is Slow Streets important to you or to your organization or to your community?
I think it's, as was stated, and Noah, thank you. This is Andy, and thank you for organizing this and such a great turnout of people interested in this topic. And Dave, it's so great to hear how quickly your advocacy efforts and others sort of joined together to make it happen so quickly, which, impresses me the most, and how that was able to happen so politically and with swiftness, given the urgency of the situation we're in. So, it is unprecedented times. There's uncertainty as to, how long it'll be till we get back to, normal, whatever that is. And one of the outcomes of this is, I hope we can, continue to go through this, this activism, this push, this ask well beyond sort of this pandemic, to build out, we've been working for years and years to talk about building out the networks that are in the plans already in place. And, and I'm glad to see Councilmember West here, because this has, regional significance as well. It's really important right now to give people safe space, to give them, space for their physical and mental well-being, and obviously for the safe distancing, to give people some room in overcrowded spaces. They've just opened up the beaches, for walking and such, and we know that's going to be very crowded very quickly, given it's near summertime. And so, there's no time to sort of move slowly on this. It's got to be quick action. And so it's inspiring to hear what Oakland's done. It's inspiring to hear what other cities have done. But as you said, we're the 8th largest city in the country, and we need to be moving quicker on this. The important thing is that, we've pulled together a group of advocates in environmental and transportation and social justice, and really try to make everyone come together on this issue, because it impacts us all, and we want it to be fair and equitable, but we want a starting point too. And we've made some recommendations that we hope will move forward. But I want to build on sort of this network approach. It's important that we're sort of looking at networks to move people around, and similar to the bike plans that we already have in place everywhere, but we need to build out networks now, even on a temporary basis, to give people these spaces. So I'm really proud of the effort that's going on here, and we're very hopeful that the city is going to announce something very soon.
Great, thanks, Andy. And I'll just jump back to Dave too on that point. And Dave, you kind of started to talk about this a little bit already, but what lessons are you all learning in terms of responding in real time and shifting your advocacy in real time, and jumping back to something Oscar brought up too, like shifting different priorities from the community, and continuing to push the city at the same time?
Oakland announced this even before we were told they were going to announce it. The mayor just got on her Thursday evening town hall and announced it. We knew it was coming, we just didn't know it was coming that night. And so one lesson is Oakland, they made the announcement really before doing a whole lot of outreach. And during shelter in place, it's not easy to do outreach, and it's certainly difficult to do meaningful outreach. So Oakland City Hall and Department of Transportation, a few other department heads in the health department, they just announced we're doing this. And so we're doing the public engagement after the fact, and there's pluses and minuses to doing that. And maybe San Diego will weigh those pluses and minuses better than we did. The plus is you actually get something on the ground quicker. If you had to wait and make sure every department and everyone was on board and each street was designed exactly how the neighborhood would most benefit from it or use it, it probably still wouldn't be in place today. So they implemented it, and then we're modifying as we go. The downside to that is we have, right now in Oakland, we have, I think it's 8 streets total on the ground, 4 more coming this weekend. And 2 of the 8 are not working very well. The neighborhoods they're not taking to the streets. They don't appreciate it. One neighborhood is a largely an African-American neighborhood. Another neighborhood is a Latino neighborhood. And all of the streets are residential streets. None of them are really through streets at all. So it's not really a land use or sort of a traffic issue per se, but we have 2 that aren't working really well. And there's been pushback. The council member for one of the streets is demanding it be removed. And a lot of our local neighborhood leaders on the other one are saying, look, no one told us this is not what we need. These aren't our priorities. And both are still on the ground right now, but we have a couple that just aren't working very well and or getting pushback. So it would have been better if we could have done some outreach up front, even maybe a week of outreach, whereas literally we did none. And at the same time, we have some streets where the neighbors are just taking right to the streets and using them in really exciting ways. And then we have some that are kind of, people are using them as they always use them and are benefiting from a slower, safer street, but it's not necessarily a whole lot different than it was before. So those are the pluses and minuses. You get something done, you get it done quicker, but you've got a lot of follow-up to do to deal with pushback and people who, even if they think it's a good idea, feel left out or feel hurt because no one told them.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, following up on that with the whole panel, I'll just circle back to asking if any of you have seen successful implementation, other versions of successful implementation that you're really excited about. Judy, we haven't heard from you yet, so specific inspiration that you found from other cities too.
I know you called on Judy, but this is Paula. Hi, Judy.
Hey, Judy, you're on mute there.
Now I'm not muted. I just wanted to say that Oakland really was the first example that I looked at that I thought, like it came out quickly, and I admire that. And it's interesting to hear that a certain percentage of the streets are maybe not working. And I'd be curious to know how they're not working. But I look at this pandemic and how, even without slow streets, how we are using our streets differently in our neighborhoods. I see so many more people out riding. And in a way, it reminds me a little bit of when bike share launched in San Diego. It was like the Wild West. Like there were just so many bikes out and people were looking at the bikes and using the bikes. And it was this moment in time that was like, wow, here is what it could look like if a lot of people had access to bicycles. And I look at this pandemic, as terrible as it is, there may be some silver lining to demonstrate how we can get around our cities differently. And it's great if everybody can like jump in and start doing things, and let's document the examples and what works and what doesn't work. But I'm super curious, Dave, about how those streets are not working. And I also kind of want you to maybe address it in terms of equity, because I've heard like from a number of people, very concerned with equity issues and impacted communities that, physical exercise and stuff, that's not really our priority right now. We have to pay rent, or we have to get to our central job. And I hear that and I think, wow, I feel for that, like the impact that the pandemic is having on those communities. But I also think that still has to be a priority for those communities to get out and exercise, because that's the health of the community. I mean, so I do feel a little bad when I hear that. Well, we just can't think about that right now because we have other priorities. But anyway.
Yeah, all neighborhoods in Oakland, this is kind of anecdotal. We are doing counts on the streets to better understand how many people are using it. The one thing we're not doing that y'all may want to do is do counts of how many people are using parks that are on these streets or just off of these streets. The parks are very popular. The city parks are very popular in Oakland. So you'll see people literally in all neighborhoods, they're using their parks. And it's just intuitive. It's what they always do. Nothing's necessarily new or different about that. Whereas in other neighborhoods that have slow streets, people are also using the slow streets. They appreciate that. And it's not because their neighborhood has fewer parks. In fact, their neighborhoods may have a few more parks than other neighborhoods. So it's not that everyone doesn't want to get out and stretch their legs, enjoy the outdoors and enjoy the warmer weather. They're already doing that, but they're doing it in the parks. And so I feel like and this is speculation, but some of the streets in some neighborhoods are like, kids just aren't taught to use the streets. And in fact, they're taught the opposite, don't use the streets. And I think all of these streets are in residential neighborhoods. We don't have any on commercial corridors. So these are residential neighborhoods, people live there. The streets in East Oakland and Fruitvale, the density is higher there, so there's more cars on the street. And I think there's just more cars per household, if you will. And so there's the culture of the streets are for cars, that declaring a street a slow street or putting up half barricades, even if it's obvious what you're doing, the culture is not to use the streets necessarily. And that's something of an oversimplification, because there are kids playing basketball on the streets, and there's a grandfather barbecuing on the side of the street. So there are some people using the streets, but the culture is to go to the parks in some neighborhoods. So I think we're trying to think, if we could have planned this ahead, how might we have designed the streets, or how might we have selected the streets, knowing that there's a culture of you drive in the streets, you don't walk or bike there, in some neighborhoods more than others.
Great, thank you, Dave. So quick reminder to listeners, feel free to drop questions into the chat. I think now's a good time to move into the question and answer session. We're already getting a lot of questions here. And I'll start with a question from Carl. Thank you, Carl. Can anyone on the panel, describe how street crossings work now and why the beg buttons are superfluous? How does dropping them affect cyclists and pedestrians? And I know this was a big priority in our coalition, so everyone feel free to jump in on
that. I'll jump in. So I'm not an engineer. I can't explain exactly how crosswalks work, but in the city of San Diego, there are crosswalk buttons, and they exist for you to press them, and then it tells the signals, okay, let's switch it from being red to being green, and having the little crosswalk man show up instead of the stop hand signal. But actually only some of those need to be pressed. So there's a large amount of crosswalk buttons that actually don't need to be pressed to give you the opportunity to walk across the street. And those are, my understanding, is located mainly in the urban core downtown Hillcrest area. So there are still some where you need to press the button to be able to cross the street. But I think probably in most neighborhoods where there is a signalized intersection, you need to press a button to be able to get the walk signal. Of course, the signal might change so that it turns green, but I have had many frustrating experiences where if you don't press it, even if the light changes eventually, there isn't the walking guide that tells you it's time to cross the street safely. And usually if the walking sign doesn't come on, it's a much shorter amount of time to cross. So especially on the larger, wider intersections and streets, you might not get that much time to safely be able to cross the street. And especially for people who need more time, seniors, people with disabilities, having to press a button where you might get infected just does not make sense. You should not have to literally beg and risk being contracting coronavirus to be able to safely cross the street. And so my understanding is that about 40% of traffic intersection signals, 40% of them, they could actually switch it and make it automatic so that you don't have to press the button to cross the street. And that could be done by the city for 40% of intersections. The rest might need more work, maybe visiting them in person or something like that. The other aspect to it, though, is that I think for, I think even if it was automated, you would still need to cross it to press the button to get the audible response and other aspects of it. So I'll stop there before I say things that I don't fully understand, but that's why it is so important to not have to press the button to be able to cross the street.
Thanks, Maya. Great. So a question from Sarah here. Are there any examples of slow streets on commercial corridors, particularly the extended sidewalk implementation? Dave, if you want to jump in on that too, more than welcome. Also, if someone could kind of explain why extending the sidewalks is an important feature of this.
Happy to start, Noah. In commercial corridors, one reason to extend the sidewalks is if a restaurant has pickup takeout on the sidewalk, people will gather on the sidewalk while they wait either to go in or to get their food. And so you can extend the sidewalk to allow for physical distancing. A lot of supermarkets are now doing that. In fact, I think they all now in Alameda County have to do that. They have to make people line up on the sidewalk so there's not too many people in the store at one time. So if you extend the sidewalks, you provide more space for people to line up and wait while people are walking down the street and just going by. So that's important. One thing I would encourage y'all to consider, because we're now considering this, we're not doing it yet, but is, restaurants are starting to think, how are we going to reopen and what is that going to be like? And in some other states, I'm from Georgia, Georgia's doing this already. The restaurants are trying to figure out, if we have to cut half our tables, that's not a good business model. What can we do with the half of the tables we're taking out of our restaurant? And if you ask a street advocate, what we'd say, put them in the street. And so Livermore, California, one of our more suburban, older cities in the downtown area, they are now talking, some of the business owners are talking, can we take First Street or First Ave and just make it a people street? It's right 1 block away from the main arterial that cars go through, and let restaurants take the half of the tables that they have to get rid of and put them out there on the street and do it in a way that you could probably still bike through. That's going to be my ask of them. So they're already thinking about this. And Bike East Bay has good relationships with lots of business districts in Oakland and Berkeley and elsewhere. And so that's the next thing I want to do, is talk to them and say, hey, can we bring this concept of not just a slow street, but a people street to your commercial districts where you need people to be out in the street, and make this kind of a win-win with businesses saying this is an economic development idea, as well as a traffic safety idea, as well as a placemaking idea, as well as a wonderful idea, I think.
Great. Yeah, and I'll just open that up to the local advocates too. Any potential for slow streets on commercial corridors in San Diego and why that's important?
Dave, I mean, I think you explained it well. My wife has 2 restaurants in Point Loma, both of which are closed for the time being. And as you said, we're trying to figure out how this looks reopening. And the idea to do that, to actually increase business, is a really smart strategy as a way to create the space that has physical distance and utilizes a slower street. Not to mention, I think there's a lot less drivers out there right now, where you have more room to do this. So I think that's, we have, 15 business districts in the city of San Diego alone. I think this is a conversation to engage with them. If this is we're in this for quite some time, and a lot of those restaurants like ours are not open right now. And they want to get back open. They have all kinds of other issues as far as retaining staff and PPP and all this stuff. But if we can help them come up with solutions that would actually help create the space they need to have increased business or more, the same amount, it's a huge thing. The other thing I'm just going to say is, and it was mentioned earlier, is that more people, it seems, are riding bikes than I've seen in a long time. And they're doing, and it's families, and it's people, wanting to, and bike shops are crazy busy right now. and they're changing their practice to accommodate the business and keep the social distancing. And we and other advocates were involved in maintaining those as essential businesses. And it's really an important thing to note that, you know, people are wanting to use their bikes to be with their families, to travel, to get out, to be healthy. And it even makes a stronger case for these slow streets. So there's a lot of changes for the better that we can be working on. And these are good ideas.
I think, like, I love that idea of expanding the restaurant space. I think restaurants have been definitely some of the biggest losers in this pandemic, and to combine that with the concept of parklets and space making, it sounds fantastic. And again, you know, if that can happen, then I just feel like it's more examples. I mean, if it was a really big rollout and we tried it and showed people that, you know, this could be really good, and you know, and how do we contact all the bids and share these ideas? And I think it might be the first time a bid would want to give up a parking space.
I've gotten one bid to agree to give up parking space. No, I've gotten two, actually, two. But yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Oscar. Sorry.
I would just add that, you know, a lot of organizations on this call submitted a letter to the city where they kind of made suggestions about particular streets that made sense. And most of those streets were corridors or that are lined with businesses. And I think many in our community supported that because that's a way that it made sense, or that it was a useful application where they could get behind because they're already walking on those streets anyway. And I just want to go back to say that you know, environmental justice communities, there's definitely a need for slow streets. You know, there's issues with overcrowding and lack of open spaces and lack of private outdoor space. And there are many essential workers that are transit dependent and are walking more than ever. So it's just about finding a way that we can open streets or slow down streets in a way that is also practical and useful for the community.
Thank you, Oscar. And maybe we can also, if you want to jump on this next question too from Toshi, and others as well are welcome to. How do we ensure needs of those who don't have bikes or cannot ride bikes, including older people, will be addressed and taken care of? And I'm hearing a lot of people on the panel talk about the need to prioritize not just cyclists, but of course pedestrians accessing essential services. So yeah, open that up to the panel.
Yeah, I'll let others kind of respond, but that's something that we're hearing, you know, when we talk to resident leaders in Barrio Logan and City Heights, is that they, you know, even if this were to come online, they're worried that they may not be able to fully benefit from it because they lack the resources or the equipment like bicycles to enjoy the slow streets. So anything the city or the city can do to, you know, facilitate, you know, EJ residents gaining access to bikes either through bike share programs, a voucher system, or something else would be super helpful.
Mm-hmm. I can add that we're hoping that Oakland will add 69th Ave as a slow street. It intersects one slow street that's in deep East Oakland. And on 69th Ave is the MLK Junior Library. And behind the library is a community bike shop. We call it The Shed. The Scraper Bikes run it. And if the city will adopt 69th Ave as a slow street, we've asked them to direct some money to the Scraper Bikes to open up the shed for more hours and allow people to come by the shed and get bikes that are donated out of there, or fix up their bikes, do some repair work. Do it in a way that usually what happens at the shed is, you know, a ton of people descend on it every Saturday. So they'd have to figure out a way to do it, I don't know, by appointment or, you know, physical distancing in the appropriate way. But my point is, we've asked ODOT, our DOT, can you give the Scraper Bikes some money? And the ODOT has done this before. They've given community groups money to help do outreach for the bike plan last year. Yeah, so this would be an extension of that. And they agree it's a good idea. They want to do it. They haven't figured out how to do it. They've just been told by the city auditor, your budget's going to be cut by 40 to 50% in the next 3 years. And so at the same time, the mayor's office, and our mayor has been a champion of the slow streets. She's trying to do a little fundraising too, not just for this idea, but for some other ways to improve slow streets with some funding to community groups. And so she's trying to do that. No announcement or no update on that. ODOT wants to do it, hasn't figured out how to do it yet. But we're hoping we can get this community bike shop open more hours on one of the slow streets.
I do want to interject to echo what Mark West just entered in the comments, which is that it is more than just about creating space for bicyclists, as we've said. And I completely agree with Oscar and everyone else that people should have access to a bike, absolutely. But that when you create more space on the streets by creating slow streets and allowing for more people to jog or ride a bike instead of walking on the sidewalk, that creates more space on the sidewalk for people who maybe have disabilities, who need to be on the sidewalk and who can't just like go around people. So it just creates, again, that safe space so that you can walk, and the people who need to be on the sidewalk can stay on the sidewalk, and people who can create that extra space can easily jump into the street to make sure everyone has that safe space without worrying about a car driving down the street fast. And so it's important for everyone. And here's Audrey. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Now I'll jump into a little bit more of a technical question from Stephanie. How long are the streets when they're made slow? Also, can you do outreach through local planning committees?
What's the first question? How long is the street, or how much time are they open?
I think, yeah, I think this is referring to distance, like how long are the street closures?
It depends on the street. Some streets, Oakland's done 4 streets every week, and they add up to about 5 miles in total. But some are, I think, 1.5 miles to maybe close to 2 miles. Others are 6, 8 blocks, kind of short. Just depends. And they're also open. I mean, they're slow streets 24/7. We're not taking them down and putting them back up.
Sweet, thanks, Dave. Now a question from Steve. How do advocates generate political will to make slow streets happen here in San Diego County and throughout Southern California? And can a move towards slow streets in San Diego County in the COVID-19 era be seen as a key step in realizing the broader Sandag's 5 big moves vision of complete streets? Thanks for the question, Steve.
I'll just say yes. I think together, advocates and all of us can raise our voice on this issue, and that's a big takeaway from today's call, is to support the ask that we're doing. So we've been putting out, a lot. When we all collectively wrote a letter, I think we're all following up with advocacy alerts on our own end. Contact your local council member in your own neighborhood. As I think Dave and others have said, these are also hyper-local sort of solutions for right now. And if your neighborhood is, if you want it, if you feel there's a need, if there's not space for you to get out of your own home, now's the time for all of us to speak up individually and collectively to our local council members to get that help, and they can, and so it's about raising the voice on this issue, and I think we're having so many people on this call is an incredible sort of powerful network that we can grow on and build off and get everybody on the same page on, and be heard.
No, I'll add, in the East Bay, we have 3 cities doing slow streets right now. Berkeley is not. And in the 3 cities we have it going on, it would not happen without council support. And not only without council support, without council insisting to staff do it. And that was, even here in Oakland, we've got a Department of Transportation with a lot of the right people running it. And when we asked them to do this, their first response was, well, we're not sure this is a priority. We're not sure we can do it. And I think it was just between you and me, it was the mayor's office that said, we want to see this happen. And the OCDOT's like, oh, okay. Of course, we want to see this happen too. Let's make it happen. In Emeryville, we have 2 council members who just insisted to staff to do it. Staff was actually cooperative there, but wouldn't have done it on their own. In Alameda, it's a 5-person council. It's a small city, 4 council members super supportive of this. And so they're doing it really over the objection of the public works director, who just does not want to do this. But 4 out of 5 council members can tell that public works director, we want to see this in this city. In Berkeley, the public works director and the city manager are still saying no. We have a supportive council there, and I think we're about to cash that chip and make it happen in Berkeley, our most bike-friendly city. And I do want to add the point that I think Mark made, or one of the chat people made. This really isn't about bicycling. This is about stretching your legs safely, comfortably in your own neighborhood, on your own street. So you don't have to drive to the beach. You don't have to drive to a regional park. You don't have to go to those destination outdoor areas. And as the weather warms up, at least up here, the weather's warming up, and it's, we're starting to think about summer and getting outside. We know we can't overcrowd the beaches and the regional parks the way we do any given year. And so I think that adds to the momentum here. Let's make our streets places we can stretch our legs.
Great. And I actually wonder if one of the local advocates could talk a little bit more about their experience with, communicating with council offices and the power in that and the potential to use that as a tool.
I can answer that, Noah. Bike SD has automated some letter writing capabilities that we send out in our email blasts, and it's on our webpage. And you can take that letter and customize it and add comments if you'd like. And but I think it's a great idea. I think I'll put up all of the email addresses for all council and the mayor, just to, because I think it is the letter writing that is the key component in getting what we want. And some of these letters, we're all working on them. Climate Action Campaign, Circulate, the Coalition, Bike SD, we're just all working on the letters together and then sending them out, and hearing from community members too is pretty powerful. And it makes a difference. It definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, it helps. Alameda had 400 signatures on their petition. Berkeley right now has 500 and still hasn't gotten what they want. What I would encourage you to do is think about what's your most supportive little city, and start there, and sort of shame San Diego. Sorry, people from San Diego on the call, but show San Diego, hey, this is popular, this is safe, this is what we need to do. And so San Diego will see that, or some other cities will see it, and just start with your most, receptive city. And because that's what bike advocates or even active transportation advocates do. We're just trying to lift all the cities up, make sure none of the cities fall behind.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think there is a regional letter that this coalition's been working on as well. Maya has spearheaded with this group, and I think folks like Mark West on the line, and the city of Encinitas, I think is looking at this as well. Those coastal cities in the county have the need to create some space too. We all do, and so I think we're taking this beyond just the city of San Diego, and and our membership is countywide. So we want to engage with everybody as much as possible.
Thanks, Andy. So now I'll jump into a question from Elizabeth. What happened to all of the bike rental companies that were everywhere? Would the city be open to running a bike rental option? I'm not sure if any of the advocates can speak to that.
Well, the city, I mean, they put in obviously guidelines for mobility devices, and then we just saw the decline of a lot of the companies themselves, and it's rather unfortunate that we don't have a true bike share anymore like we had, and it would be a valuable system in a time like this. And so I hope we can come away and sort of re-energize that need. But in the meantime, what can we do to work with local bike shops, others to get some other things going for hyper local bike share kind of needs too. Bike kitchens, anything we can do.
Hi, this is Isabel Kay. I've been listening in and doing some other work, but I was thinking about that exact question about the multiple uses, because although UC San Diego is basically shut down for physical presence at the moment, it was a total nightmare. They just opened it up to electric bikes and scooters and every possible hoverboards and this, that, and the other. And I'm just thinking that it's not really just sufficient to have one lane for wheeled, but vehicles, bicycles or whatever, that you really need to have at least two, so that they're the fast movers and the slow movers, because people are probably going to start doing this kind of moving around again, and it helps. Even like going up the Torrey Pines Hill, there are 2 lanes, and that's great. Well, right now what we're doing is using the second bike lane as a spacer, so that the bike or the pedestrian doesn't go out into traffic. Actually, that's working really well on the uphill there. But anyway, that's just my question as to how to incorporate that with a view to the future, so that we can maintain this adoption of more non-car vehicles. Thanks.
Thanks, Isabel. And I'll throw in a similar question that was asked on the chat, and I'll make that the last question for the webinar today. Nicole asked in a similar vein, Dave, does any city intend to keep these slow streets going after we reopen the economy? So if Dave and others want to chime in on those themes.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. Emeryville did Doyle Street, and they just implemented a plan that was already approved for it to be a neighborhood boulevard, with 1 block closed off where there's a large city park that the road goes through. So they just accelerated something that they already kind of had in the works. And then Berkeley, if Berkeley does anything, it's going to be on their boulevard network that was approved 20 something years ago when I first moved to Berkeley. And so that's what the advocates were asking for, was just do what your boulevard network says you agreed to do 20 years ago and slow traffic on these streets. So that would no doubt stay if it happens. In Oakland, it's an open question. It's definitely an open question if it stays or not. We haven't started that discussion yet. We very intentionally have said this is interim. This is a health mitigation. This isn't active transportation. This is not even a climate change mitigation. I think those conversations are going to start changing, mainly because I think here in the Bay Area, we're not feeling like the health crisis is the huge pandemic that we feared it was going to be, and is in other parts of the country for sure. Our hospital emergency rooms are half empty here. Relatively speaking, the death tolls are lower than was feared. So anyway, the health department is supportive of us doing this. People don't feel like the hospitals are overwhelmed, so we can start having these conversations about how this is great for business, or how this is great for the climate, or how this is great for just letting people enjoy their neighborhoods.
Thanks, Dave. And I'll just finally here with our panel, if anybody wants to jump on those themes, or just anybody on the panel want to make a final comment as we wrap up our webinar.
So Randy with City Heights CDC just shared in the chat a link to the Safe Routes Partnership recommendations and guidelines. And it reminded me that I just wanted to emphasize that, well, of course, everyone needs to walk for their mental well-being or physical fitness. I still think that the need for slow streets, the need to make beg buttons automated so you don't have to press them. The need is so that people can get to their jobs and people can get to the grocery store or the pharmacy first and foremost. I think we need to be addressing and focusing on people's primary needs and their general welfare in this really stressful time. And any additional benefits to creating space for people to recreate, that's great. But first and foremost, the action of slow streets should be benefiting people's true needs. And I really hope that the city of San Diego is able to join other cities from across the country in creating that safe space through slow streets and through the crosswalk buttons, just to help people survive and get by in these times.
And I would agree completely, Maya, to take care of our most essential workers right now, and people who need to get to their close places for their needs, and you know, hopefully we and the city can act quickly to make a starting point happen that we can grow out. You know, I think we've got an ask that our coalition has put out there some recommendations. We have a bike route network that's designed to be slower to begin with, as was Dave was talking about. So we should be looking at all these options right now to see what we can do quickly in this interim period.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Looks like we're just about out of time here. So yeah, I want to thank all of our panelists for their expertise, sharing their thoughts with us. Thank you to all the attendees for joining us this afternoon. And last thing here, I'm going to message the link to the Bike SD email that you can send. So if you want to send an email to the mayor urging slow streets or sharing your thoughts on slow streets, you can go to the Bike SD website, which I'm messaging here in the chat. Great. Well, thanks again, everyone. Take care and stay safe. And great to see you all. And yeah, stay well.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thank you, Noah.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Noah.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Noah.
Oscar.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good conversation.